You're watching Northern Crimes.
There's something about the Pacific Northwest. It's not just the geography, forests, the rivers, the remote stretches of highway. It's the way stories seem to hang in the air. Stories that begin like any other, a hike, a trip, a night out, and then stop without warning. A person missing with no trace, a murder with no suspect, a discovery that raises more questions than it answers. These aren't legends, they're case files, and they're still open. In this episode, we're examining 8 cold cases and unsolved mysteries from across the region. Stories left behind in police reports, in search grids, and in the memories of those who haven't forgotten. Each one leaves behind a puzzle, and together they leave something bigger. A region shaped not just by what's been found, but by what remains unknown. This is Northern Crimes. On June 9th, 2013, 19-year-old Maureen Kelly joined a group of friends at Canyon Creek Campground in Washington's Gifford-Pinchot National Forest. The plan was simple, a quiet weekend in nature, but as dusk settled over the trees, Maureen made a chilling announcement.
"I'm going on a spiritual quest."
Then, in a baffling move, she stripped completely naked, leaving behind her clothing, shoes, and gear, and walked barefoot into the forest with only a small fanny pack, carrying a knife, matches, and a compass. She was never seen again. Maureen's friends said she'd talked about a spiritual journey before, but no one expected her to follow through, especially in such extreme fashion. She'd borrowed camping gear for the trip, posted ukulele videos online just days earlier, and showed no signs of distress. Whatever changed that evening happened suddenly. When she failed to return by midnight, her friends called the authorities, and the search began immediately. Searchers quickly found barefoot tracks matching her size. They traced them across Canyon Creek, up a steep embankment, and on to Forest Service Road 54. One volunteer said,
"How she got down there barefoot is a wonder. How she came up out of the bottom is a wonder."
But once the tracks hit the road, they stopped. K9 units couldn't pick up her scent. Had she been picked up by a car? Had she wandered further into the woods? No one could say. Conditions were deteriorating. Temperatures in the 40s, light rain, rugged terrain, and Maureen had no clothing, no food, no shelter. By June 15th, after 75 volunteers had searched 4 square miles, the official search was called off. Authorities suspected hypothermia, but found no evidence of foul play. Without a body, her fate remained open-ended. Her disappearance drew comparisons to others who vanished in the same forest. Most notably, Christopher Zitzowitz, who went missing in the same area just months later. Then, in August 2024, a hiker found human remains in the Big Lava Bend area. Investigators believed they might belong to either Kelly or Zitzowitz. DNA later confirmed they were indeed Zitzowitz. Maureen Kelly's case remains unsolved. No clothing, no remains, no answers. Just a young woman who walked into the forest with nothing and vanished. In September 1992, 14-year-old Misty Copsey vanished after a day at the Puyallup Fair in Washington State. What began as a carefree outing with her friend Trina would spiral into one of the Pacific Northwest's most perplexing cold cases. Have you ever wondered how someone could simply disappear without a trace? How a teenager's life could be cut short with so many questions left unanswered? Well, that's exactly what happened to Misty Copsey, a case that's baffled investigators for over 3 decades. Misty was a bright, ambitious teenager with dreams of attending college. On September 17, 1992, she and her friend Trina spent the afternoon at the Puyallup Fair. When it came time to leave, Misty missed her 8:40 p.m. bus home to Spanaway. She called her mother, Diana Smith, from a payphone, explaining her situation. Diana, working as a caretaker for an elderly woman that night, couldn't pick her up. Misty mentioned possibly getting a ride from Reuben Schmidt, an 18-year-old acquaintance. Diana, distrusting Schmidt, told her daughter to find another way home. That was the last time she ever spoke to Misty. What happened next remains shrouded in mystery. According to witnesses, Misty was last seen walking near Meridian Avenue in downtown Puyallup around 10 p.m. Despite extensive searches, she never made it home. The investigation was immediately plagued with problems. Police initially classified Misty as a runaway, despite her mother's insistence that something was terribly wrong. And this critical error meant valuable evidence and leads were lost in those crucial first days. 4 months later, in February 1993, searchers made a grim discovery near Highway 410. Misty's jeans, underwear, shoes, and a sock. The location was eerily close to where 2 other murdered Puyallup girls had been found years earlier. DNA testing in 2009 revealed an unexpected twist. The DNA on the jeans belonged to an unidentified male, not Misty. Several suspects emerged over the years. Reuben Schmidt, who claimed to have suffered a, quote, blackout the night Misty disappeared, remained a person of interest. His roommate initially stated Schmidt had left to pick up Misty that night, though Schmidt denied this. Despite suspicious behavior, including running from police when questioned, he was never charged. Another potential suspect was Robert Leslie Hickey, who committed a similar attack on a young woman just blocks from where Misty disappeared. The red paint chips found on Misty's jeans could have matched his red Camaro, but this lead was never fully investigated. Decades later, Diana Smith passed away without ever knowing what happened to her daughter. The case remains open, with investigators still hoping for that one crucial piece of evidence that might finally bring justice for Misty. On August 20th, 2007, a 12-year-old girl made a discovery that would launch one of the most bizarre mysteries in modern forensic history. Walking along Jedediah Island in British Columbia, she picked up what appeared to be a discarded running shoe, but inside was a human foot, still wearing a sock. It was the first of what would become known as the Salish Sea Feet, a phenomenon that has baffled investigators for nearly 2 decades. Less than a week later, a second foot washed ashore on nearby Gabriola Island. Police were stunned to discover both were right feet wearing different shoes, meaning they belonged to different people. As RCMP Corporal Gary Cox told reporters,
"Finding one foot is like 1,000,000 to 1 odds, but to find 2 is crazy."
what followed defied all logic. Since that first discovery, more than 20 detached human feet have been found on beaches throughout the Salish Sea region, spanning both British Columbia and Washington state. The feet have appeared with disturbing regularity, sometimes months apart, sometimes within days of each other. The pattern was as consistent as it was unsettling. Nearly all feet were found inside running shoes, which investigators believe kept them buoyant enough to eventually wash ashore while protecting them from decomposition. The shoes also provided crucial clues. Forensic teams could determine manufacture dates, giving them time frames for when the shoes were likely purchased and worn. Early theories ran wild. Some speculated about serial killers targeting the region. Others suggested the feet belonged to victims of plane crashes or human trafficking operations. The proximity to major shipping lanes led to theories about maritime disasters or organized crime dumping bodies at sea. But as investigators began matching DNA from the feet to missing persons reports, a different picture emerged. The feet weren't the work of a killer. They were tragic reminders of people who died by accident or suicide, their bodies naturally decomposing in the ocean's depths. Dr. Gail Anderson, a forensic entomologist at Simon Fraser University, explained the science behind the phenomenon.
Arthropods will skeletonize and disarticulate a body quite quickly, depending on oceanic conditions.
She noted the ankle joint is relatively weak, making feet among the first body parts to separate during decomposition. Modern running shoes, with their air-filled soles and buoyant materials, act as flotation devices. While the rest of the body sinks and is consumed by sea life, the shoe-encased foot floats to the surface. Ocean currents and prevailing winds then carry these grim packages toward shore. Of the 20-plus feet discovered, the BC Coroner Service has successfully identified 13 through DNA analysis. Most belong to people who'd been missing for over a year. One foot was linked to a fisherman who disappeared in 1987. The case has revealed a heartbreaking catalog of human tragedy, suicides, accidents, and people who simply vanished without explanation. Only one case remains unsolved. In February 2016, 2 feet in New Balance sneakers washed up on Botanical Beach near Port Renfrew. Despite extensive investigation, including sending DNA samples to Washington state authorities, the identity of this person remains unknown. The Vancouver Feet mystery serves as a sobering reminder that the ocean never truly gives up its secrets. It simply returns them, piece by piece, when we least expect it. On November 24, 1971, a middle-aged businessman in a dark suit and white shirt approached the Northwest Orient Airlines counter at Portland International Airport. He paid cash for a one-way ticket to Seattle, identifying himself as Dan Cooper. Within hours, this unassuming passenger would pull off the only unsolved case of air piracy in American history, vanishing into legend as D.B. Cooper. Cooper appeared to be the perfect passenger, polite, well-dressed, and unremarkable. He ordered a bourbon and soda, lit a cigarette, and settled into seat 18E in the last row of the Boeing 727. Flight attendant Florence Schaffner barely noticed him until he handed her a note claiming he had a bomb. Initially dismissing it as another lonely businessman's phone number, Schaffner tucked the note into her purse, but Cooper leaned forward and whispered,
"Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb."
When she opened the briefcase, Schaffner saw what appeared to be dynamite, red cylinders connected by wires to a large battery. Cooper's demands were surprisingly modest, $200,000 in $20 bills and 4 parachutes. He was calm, even courteous, ordering another drink while the plane circled Seattle for 2 hours as authorities scrambled to meet his demands. Flight attendant Tina Mucklow later described him as, quote, not nervous, and quote, rather nice. What set Cooper apart from other hijackers was his apparent expertise. He knew the Boeing 727 was uniquely equipped with aft stairs that could be lowered in flight, a feature so classified that even civilian crews weren't aware of it. He specified precise flight configurations, landing gear down, flaps at 15 degrees, altitude below 10,000 feet. When asked about his destination, he mentioned that McChord Air Force Base was, quote, only 20 minutes away, an accurate assessment that suggested military knowledge. After releasing the 36 passengers in Seattle, Cooper instructed the crew to fly toward Mexico City, but somewhere over the dense forests of southwestern Washington, around 8 p.m., he did the impossible. Cooper lowered the aft stairs, stepped into a freezing rainstorm, and jumped into the darkness carrying $200,000 and wearing only a business suit and loafers. The FBI launched one of the longest-running investigations in its history, interviewing hundreds of suspects and following thousands of leads. The only confirmed evidence of Cooper's fate came in 1980, when an 8-year-old boy found $5,800 in deteriorating $20 bills along the Columbia River, money that matched Cooper's ransom serial numbers. Cooper's true identity sparked decades of speculation. Was he Robert Rackstraw, the decorated paratrooper with a criminal past? Kenneth Christensen, the Northwest Orient employee who bore a striking resemblance to the FBI sketches? Richard McCoy, who pulled off a nearly identical hijacking months later? Each suspect had compelling evidence for and against their involvement. The mystery deepened with Cooper's apparent contradictions. He seemed knowledgeable about aviation, yet chose an inferior parachute. He planned meticulously, but jumped in terrible weather, wearing inappropriate clothing. He demanded 4 parachutes to suggest taking a hostage, yet one was a non-functioning training chute. In 2016, the FBI officially suspended active investigation, but Cooper's legend endures. He remains the only hijacker to escape and never be caught, a gentleman bandit who said please and thank you while committing the perfect crime. On May 19th, 1977, 20-year-old Colleen Stan was hitchhiking from her home in Eugene, Oregon, to a friend's birthday party in Westwood, California. As an experienced hitchhiker, she had already declined 2 rides that morning before accepting what seemed like a safe option, a blue van carrying a young couple and their baby. But what happened next would become one of the most horrific cases of captivity in FBI history. Cameron and Janice Hooker appeared to be the perfect family. The presence of their infant in the back seat gave Colleen confidence that she was making a smart choice. For the first 20 minutes, everything seemed normal as they drove south along Interstate 5 through Northern California. Then, Cameron pulled off the highway, claiming he wanted to investigate some nearby caves. As Janice took the baby down to the lake, Cameron moved to the back seat and held a knife to Colleen's throat.
He tied me up and placed a box over my head.
The wooden headbox was designed to prevent light, sound, and fresh air from entering, the first taste of the nightmare that would consume the next 7 years of her life. What Colleen didn't know was that Cameron and Janice had reached a twisted agreement. Cameron had been using his wife for sexual bondage, but now wanted a slave to take Janice's place. They'd been hunting for the perfect victim, and Colleen's trusting nature made her an ideal target. Cameron forced her to sign a slave contract in January 1978, convincing her that a powerful organization called, quote, the Company, would torture her family if she tried to escape. She was given the designation K and forced to call Cameron Master. For years, Colleen was kept locked in a wooden box under the couple's waterbed for up to 23 hours a day. The box was so small she couldn't stand up or stretch out fully. She was fed scraps and used a bedpan positioned with her feet. When Janice gave birth to a second child in 1978, it happened on the waterbed directly above Colleen's prison. The psychological manipulation was as devastating as the physical torture. Cameron showed Colleen a photograph of Marie Elizabeth Spanicki, a previous victim whose body was never found, reinforcing his threats about, quote, the Company. Colleen's fear was so complete that even when she was eventually allowed to jog outside, work in the yard, and even visit her family in 1981, she never attempted to escape. The turning point came in 1984 when Cameron wanted Colleen to become his second wife. This was too much for Janice, who finally told Colleen the truth. The Company didn't exist. In August 1984, Colleen walked to a bus station and called Cameron to tell him she was leaving. He burst into tears, but she caught the bus home to her family. 3 months later, Janice reported Cameron to the police. He was convicted and sentenced to 104 years in prison. Colleen's case became known worldwide as the girl in the box, a testament to the human spirit's ability to survive unimaginable horror. But the case didn't end with Cameron's conviction. In 2021, he was released on parole to the Department of State Hospitals after being classified as a sexually violent predator. Colleen later stated,
"He's just an evil person. I would really love to say that he is a different person, but he's not."
Colleen's survival strategy involved what she called, quote, going somewhere else in her mind.
"I learned I could go anywhere in my mind. You just remove yourself from the real situation going on, and you go somewhere pleasant, around people you love."
Today, Colleen continues to live in California under a different name. Every year, on August 10th, the anniversary of her escape, she and her family celebrate with a party on the beach.
"I thoroughly enjoy my freedom. Always, always, always. You have to learn how to live in the now and not let the past drag you back."
The girl in the box became a woman who refused to let evil define her future. On the warm morning of August 1st, 2018, 28-year-old Samantha Sayers picked up a pencil at the Vesper Peak trailhead and wrote her name in the register. It was 8 a.m., and the experienced hiker was embarking on a solo day trip through Washington's North Cascades. That simple signature would become the last concrete evidence of Sam's whereabouts, launching one of the largest search and rescue operations in state history. Sam was no stranger to these mountains. The Pennsylvania native had fallen in love with Seattle after college and made hiking a weekly ritual with her boyfriend, Kevin Dares. She owned an Airbnb cleaning service that gave her life flexible schedules, perfect for exploring the challenging peaks surrounding the city. Vesper Peak, at 6,221 feet, was a familiar destination she'd explored before. The day seemed perfect for hiking. Clear skies, warm temperatures, and good visibility drew summer crowds to the trail despite it being a Wednesday. Other hikers remembered seeing Sam distinctly. Her bald head due to alopecia and her habit of hiking in just a sports bra made her easily recognizable as she climbed the 4,000-foot ascent. Around 2:30 p.m., fellow hikers spotted Sam at the summit, eating lunch and scrolling through her phone. She chatted briefly with a group of rock climbers before strapping on her backpack and beginning the descent down the southwest side of the mountain. That sighting marked the last time anyone would see Samantha Sayers alive. Sam had planned to return by 6 p.m. and check in with Kevin, as was their routine. When that call never came, Kevin grew increasingly worried. By 10 p.m., he was driving the hour and a half to the trailhead, stopping only to buy a flashlight at a gas station. Finding Sam's Ford Fiesta still in the parking lot, Kevin began hiking up the dark trail, calling her name. About halfway up, he tripped and broke his flashlight, forcing him to retreat using only his phone's light. At the Verlo Public Service Center, he used a payphone to call 911 just after midnight. The search began at dawn on August 2nd with Snohomish County search and rescue teams, helicopters equipped with infrared technology, and specialized mountain rescue volunteers. The operation quickly expanded to include over 70 searchers on foot, 14 dog teams, and aircraft from multiple agencies. A brief moment of hope came when Sam's phone pinged in Seattle's Belltown neighborhood. Seattle police rushed to her apartment, but Sam wasn't there. The ping was later explained when Kevin's mother, working with the phone carrier, had inadvertently cloned Sam's phone while trying to access her account information. Despite 22 days of intensive searching, covering 8,000 man-hours and utilizing cutting-edge technology, no trace of Sam was found. Searchers explored every conceivable location where a hiker might fall, but some areas remained inaccessible. Below Vesper Peak's steep north face, a glacier forms a moat at the base of the cliff, a location too dangerous for searchers to access. The official search ended on August 23, 2018, but Sam's case sparked an unprecedented volunteer effort. A Facebook group called Find Sam Ayers grew to over 30,000 followers, and a GoFundMe raised nearly $60,000 to continue search efforts. Today, Sam's disappearance remains one of the Pacific Northwest's most haunting mysteries, joining the growing list of people who vanish without a trace in America's wilderness. On March 6, 2009, 36-year-old Nancy Moyer stopped at the Tenino Thriftway after work to pick up groceries. Security cameras captured her at 6:45 p.m. purchasing wine, cigarettes, and a Hungry Man dinner, items that would later become crucial evidence in understanding her final hours. It was the last time Nancy would ever be seen alive. Nancy was a devoted mother of 2 young daughters who worked as an accountant for the Washington State Department of Ecology. Recently separated from her husband Bill, she was navigating single motherhood while living in a small rental house in Tenino, a quiet town of just 1,700 residents in Thurston County. Her daughters were spending the weekend with their father, leaving Nancy alone for what should have been a peaceful Friday evening. When Bill arrived on Sunday, March 8th, to drop off the girls, he found Nancy's front door slightly ajar. Inside, the house told a disturbing story. The television was still on, lights were burning throughout the home, and Nancy's cigarettes sat on the counter next to the unopened wine bottles from her grocery trip. Her car remained in the driveway, keys and purse inside the house, but Nancy was nowhere to be found. The scene suggested Nancy had been interrupted mid-evening. Her nightgown was laid out on the bed as if she'd been preparing for sleep, but there were no signs of a struggle. Most ominously, a neighbor reported hearing a woman's voice around 11 p.m. on March 6th, saying, quote, "Hurry up," followed by car doors slamming and a vehicle driving away. The investigation immediately focused on Nancy's personal life. She'd been dating Jim Roth, a coworker who claimed they were supposed to meet that Friday evening. When Nancy allegedly didn't show up, Roth said he went to her house the next day, found the door ajar, walked inside, and left when he didn't find her. Investigators found this behavior highly suspicious. Who enters someone's home uninvited when they're not there? Another person of interest emerged in Bernard Howell, a local meat salesman who'd visited Nancy's home. In 2010, Howell brutally murdered Vonda Boone on a walking trail, slitting her throat and assaulting her body. Given Howell's proximity to Nancy, he lived within a minute of her house, and his history of extreme violence, investigators suspected a connection. However, Howell denied ever knowing Nancy, despite multiple witnesses confirming he'd sold meat to residents in her neighborhood. The case took a dramatic turn in July 2019 when Eric Lee Roberts, Nancy's neighbor and coworker, called 911 to confess. Roberts claimed he'd accidentally strangled Nancy during a sexual encounter and buried her remains on his property. Police arrested him and searched extensively, but found no evidence to support his confession. The next day, in fact, Roberts recanted his story, claiming he didn't know why he'd confessed. Despite the retraction, many investigators believe Roberts knows more than he's revealed. Suspiciously, he'd poured a concrete slab in his yard shortly after Nancy's disappearance, and he had a documented history of domestic violence. Today, Nancy's case remains officially unsolved. Her family continues to seek answers, offering a $5,000 reward for information leading to the recovery of her remains. In a town where everyone knows everyone, Nancy Moyer's disappearance stands as a haunting reminder that evil can lurk behind the most familiar faces. In the quiet town of Ashland, Oregon, nestled along I-5 at the tail end of the Rogue Valley, murder is a rare occurrence. Known for its idyllic scenery and yearly Shakespeare Festival, this peaceful community was shattered by one of the most brutal and mysterious killings in Oregon's history. On November 19, 2011, 23-year-old David Grubbs was walking home from his shift at Shop and Cart grocery store. Taking his usual route along the central Ashland bike path, David had no reason to fear for his safety. The path was well-traveled, bordered by a residential neighborhood and city park, and just shouting distance from an elementary school. But as darkness fell on that rainy autumn night, something sinister awaited him. Around 5:35 p.m., a 911 call came in. A woman riding her bike had discovered David's body, and when police arrived, they were confronted with a scene of unimaginable brutality. David had been attacked with such violence that he was nearly decapitated. The weapon investigators determined was likely a machete or sword. What made this case particularly disturbing wasn't just the brutality, but the complete lack of motive. David was described by everyone who knew him as gentle, kind. Standing over 6 feet tall, he was physically imposing, but had a reputation for being the nicest kid his boss had ever met. A talented musician who played upright bass in high school, David had no known enemies. The investigation quickly hit roadblocks. Despite extensive searches, no murder weapon was ever found. The darkness of the unlit bike path meant witnesses were scarce. One woman reported seeing an unknown man leaving the scene, but she couldn't provide a detailed description in the darkness. As days turned into weeks, theories began to emerge. Some investigators wondered if David's interest in online gaming might have played a role, specifically the Assassin's Creed franchise with its sword-wielding characters. Others looked into Ashland's active LARPing community, where medieval weapons weren't uncommon. A homeless population along the Bear Creek Greenway was also scrutinized. In 2015, authorities named their first and only person of interest, Christian De Laurentiis, a convicted killer who'd been in the Ashland area during the time of David's death. De Laurentiis, who later dismembered his roommate in an unrelated case, was known to have committed bank robberies along the I-5 corridor. However, no charges were ever filed connecting him to David's murder. Nearly 13 years later, the case remains unsolved. In February 2025, Ashland police assigned 2 new detectives to the investigation, offering a glimmer of hope for David's family. A reward of over $21,000 remains available for information leading to an arrest. The brutal sword murder of David Grubbs continues to haunt Ashland, proving that violent evil can strike without warning, even in places we consider safe. If you have information about the David Grubbs case, contact the Ashland Police Department at 541-488-2211. The cases we've covered today span decades, borders, and terrain. From city streets to deep wilderness, from the edge of the ocean to the edge of reason. Some stories are marked by silence, others by violence, and a few by the simple fact that no one has ever come forward to explain what really happened. What ties them together isn't just geography, it's the lingering absence of answers. Each case remains open, each one a question that time hasn't resolved. In the Pacific Northwest, mysteries don't fade. They wait in case files, in memories, and in the hope that someone, somewhere, still knows the truth.